Hello, everybody. This is Matt Erpelding, Vice President of Government and Community Relations from the Boise Metro Chamber of Commerce. And today we have a program that's specifically focused on local government, our city's budgets, and how that relates to our property tax issues that we're facing in the Treasure Valley. I've got three incredible guests from three different cities with me today, but before we get to them, I'd just like to remind everyone that the Boise Metro Chamber is a member-driven nonprofit organization dedicated to ensuring a positive business climate in the Treasure Valley and beyond. Today we have two incredible sponsors of this event, Hayden Homes and Idaho Housing and Finance Association, who are also committed to ensuring that we have high quality housing and also affordable housing across the valley. The Boise Metro Chamber is the only 5-star accredited member of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce in Idaho, and we take that very seriously when we prepare events. And we thank you for joining us because we know that this issue is important across the state, but particularly important as the Treasure Valley continues to see a housing boom, even in the midst of a nationwide recession. So before we start, I'd like to introduce our panelists. I'm going to start with Council Member Miranda Gold. Miranda is an 8th-generation Idahoan, born and raised in Twin Falls, and she was elected to the Eagle City Council in 2017. She has a bachelor's of science in anthropology from Texas State University and a background in private sector project management and administration. Additionally, she serves on the Eagle Urban Renewal Agency and is a member of the St. Luke's Meridian Eagle Advisory Council. She lives in Eagle with her husband and her 2 sons. Welcome, Miranda. Next, I've got Council Member Luke Cavner from Meridian. Luke's a lifelong resident of Ada County, and while he moved to Meridian at age 4, it's always been his home. Luke attended the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, where he had the opportunity to intern in Washington, D.C. for then Senator John Ensign, a Republican from Nevada. He formerly served as the community liaison for the city of Meridian, where he aided as an advocate for those in our community establishing events like the Treasure Valley Youth Summit. Luke currently works as the managing director of Western Advocacy for the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network, working to benefit the lives of cancer patients, caregivers, and survivors. He was elected to city council he joined city council in 2014, and he lives with his wife Adrian and sons Gunnar and Lincoln in South Meridian. And last but not least, we have council member Holly Woodings, who serves as president pro tem of the Boise City Council. She focuses her work on keeping Boise a great place for families and businesses and encouraging the next generation of community leaders. Holly served as a state rep with me from 2012 to 2014 in Idaho's 72nd legislature. She's a proud graduate of Boise State University and is a current student in the executive MBA program. Prior to entering public service, she worked in the renewable energy industry, helping to develop and finance Idaho's largest wind energy farm before founding the Woodings Group, a consultancy specializing in startup energy companies. Holly serves on the board of directors for the Girl Scouts of Silver Sage, the Boise State Foundation, and on the board of advisors for Idaho Women in Leadership. She lives in East Boise with her husband, Ryan, and her 2 children, Mary and Arthur. Welcome, you 4. To today's conversation. I'm sure it's going to be enlightening, particularly because I don't think all the time people really recognize how cities and counties and all of these other taxing districts really come together to create a property tax bill. A lot of the time the blame is centered solely on cities when property tax goes up, and that's really difficult. But before we get to that conversation, I got to ask, COVID-19 has basically flipped everyone's world upside down, and each of us are handling it a different way. So starting with you, Holly, how are you dealing with this, especially with 2 young kids at home?
I'm drinking more wine. So the Idaho wine industry can be thankful for COVID-19. Fortunately, I'm really lucky that the city's been flexible. I have a work from home partner. So we've just been, I think, hustling like a lot of other families just to make online learning work and spending a lot more time at home and outside. So overall, it's been manageable, but 2020 is going to be one for the books.
Yeah, that's an understatement. Councilman Cavner.
Yeah, like Councilmember Woodings, it's been a unique time. I got to thank you though, Matt. This is the first time in 7 months that I've put on a tie, so that's a big change.
You look great.
Well, thanks. I feel like I got a face for radio, but we're making it work today. I think like a lot of families, we're just building this plane as we're flying it. Juggling, taking care of our kids, being able to be involved in our community, continue to function on our jobs on a daily basis. It's presenting unique challenges, and it always feels like no Monday is ever going to be the same. Monday is always going to be different from Tuesday, and so on and so forth. So just trying to make the best of it. I know one of the things that, as I talk to a lot of families, we really benefited from is my family and I are having dinner around the table almost every night, every week, which is something I got to be honest, a year ago we weren't doing. So we're trying to do our best to make lemonade out of lemons.
That's great. I've noticed that about our family as well, as outside on the back patio, and it's a treat. Councilmember Gold, how are you doing?
Yeah, like my fellow council members here, we're kind of just navigating this unusual time to the best of our ability. I think unlike a lot of folks, I've been able to not participate in a lot of Zoom meetings. And we've been, had a flexible schedule with the city. And I also have a work from home partner, and my kids are transitioning the best of their abilities with the online school and transitioning back into school part-time. And so we're just hanging in there and doing the best we can, like all of our neighbors here.
I wanted to comment, when I read your bio that you're an 8th generation Idahoan, I felt like this twinge of pride, because I joke, I'm a 1st generation, I moved here, but my wife's 5th and my daughter's a 6th generation Idahoan. And 2 more generations really means your family has been in the Magic Valley for a long time. So anyways, I thought that was pretty cool. And I know that, when citizens think about our community, the Treasure Valley is just lumped into one municipality a lot of the time. And the truth is that Eagle in particular is sandwiched in between Meridian and Boise, the 2 largest cities in the valley. It's impacted by their policies, but Eagle is a much different city. And I was hoping that you could differentiate a little bit about how Eagle is different from the 2 bigger cities that are your most prominent neighbors.
Well, in terms of property taxes and city budgets, which is kind of the conversation today, we have a lot of different taxing districts in our community that provide city services like Eagle Fire and Eagle Sewer. And we contract with Ada County Sheriff's Office for our police services. About 80% of residents' tax bills go towards Eagle Fire, Eagle Sewer, and West Ada School District, whereas only 8% goes to the city of Eagle. We have one of the lowest levy rates in the state, and generally the increases that residents see in their property taxes are a result of significant increase in other taxing districts and increase in property value assessments. Taxes going to the city of Eagle have only increased less than $50 per household per year since 2015.
Wow. So essentially what you're saying is that the city of Eagle makes up one of the smallest aspects of people's property tax budgets, but how often do you feel like the city gets blamed for property tax increases?
Yeah, that's often a concern that we hear from residents, and the way we get to, present the services that we provide and the services that residents value and kind of what we're trying to work with here in our budgets helps. We're doing a lot more education to try to help residents understand that.
And Luke, and Meridian and Boise are much different because you have your own police force, you have your own fire force. In the case of Boise, for sure, we have our own sewer district. So that's all managed by the city instead of having these disparate taxing districts like you have in Eagle. But in your case, between 2010 and 2019, your city doubled in size and is one of the fastest growing cities in the nation. There was a lot of conversation during the legislature this year about new construction and how new construction adds to property taxes. But talk a little bit about how important new construction is for your city, not just to manage the growth, but in fact to help keep property taxes down.
Matt, I think it's a really good question. And frankly, I think Meridian has been growing ever since my parents moved here in 1984. Another, I think, really interesting fact is from 2008 to 2018, we doubled in size, took a breath, and then tripled in size. And then kind of, you mentioned again, yet another double. So we've been growing nonstop for it feels like 40 years. And so for municipalities that are continuing to experience record growth year after year after year, our citizens, their demand for services don't stop. And so it's that new construction revenue that has allowed us to become really a fully functioning, full service municipality with a full-time police service, fire service, world-class parks. And as we continue to grow, we rely on that new construction revenue to build new fire stations, to purchase more police vehicles, to put parks in the parts of our community that continue to grow. And so it's such a important piece of growth really paying for growth. In cities across Idaho that aren't growing as much, and you hear a lot of our friends at the State House often talk about the tales of two Idahos, and in a big chunk of our state, they're not seeing real significant growth right now. But I think that we're going to continue to see that growth expand outside of the Treasure Valley, to the Magic Valley, Eastern Idaho, even up north. And if we continue to look to clamp down on new construction revenue, we're really going to face our citizens with some really big challenges down the road. So new construction revenue is a critical component of growth really paying for itself.
Even though you're the fastest growing city nationally, I don't think people really differentiate between Meridian and Boise. And because Boise's the capital city, Boise ends up in all of these places, but the surrounding community, the suburbs of the city of Boise are a really big deal. In Holly, that's a double-edged sword, right? Boise's popularity nationally, the continued movement toward our Treasure Valley is a huge deal. But talk a little bit about how real estate prices and the city of Boise's popularity, how that double-edged sword impacts residents with regard to their property taxes.
Yeah, thanks for making that connection, Matt. It's such an interesting conversation because the popularity of Boise and our metro area as a whole has really driven up property values. And we're seeing that continue throughout the, kind of tale of two recessions that we're in right now, where folks on the higher end of the income ladder are still able to purchase property, and while folks on the lower end of the income ladder are really suffering. So, throughout this pandemic, we've continued to see our properties in Boise increase in value. Our median home value right now is about $400,000 on the selling price. So we're really seeing homes expand in their value, which leads to higher property taxes, while commercial properties on the other end are remaining flat. So I think that even though we're trying to stem the rise of people's property taxes, they're still going to see their property taxes rise for those reasons.
And to your point, the real challenge here is that when we see home values across the valley, I mean, from Caldwell to the city of Boise to the east, the real challenge there is that when you see 20% year over year valuations in the residential market, but you only see 2 to 4% valuations in the commercial market, the property taxes shift onto residential housing. And that's one of the leading causes of these property tax spikes that we're seeing in the valley. So it's good if you want to sell your house. It's bad if you want to live in your house for the long term. Yeah. And, Miranda, the same challenge is occurring in CUNA or in Eagle, which is similar to what CUNA has, albeit a little bit smaller. And that is, Eagle has for a long time been kind of a bedroom community for Boise, meaning they live in Eagle and then they drive into the city of Boise, and there's an imbalance between the amount of available commercial property and residential property. Talk a little bit about what the city of Eagle is doing to try to drive up the commercial property to try to balance out some of these property tax issues that we're seeing.
So as the saying goes, retail and restaurants and hospitality, for that matter, follow rooftops. And our community is just now reaching a point where we're starting to turn that corner and be able to attract and retain more commercial. We're currently at about 86% residential and 14% commercial. In the last couple of years, we've hired an economic development director, and we've adopted an economic development strategic plan. And the city continues to look at different ways to attract and incentivize businesses and competitively market our community. We also have an urban renewal district in our downtown to help support downtown commercial development. And we've also consulted or contracted with a consultant to develop a tool to help inform us about the fiscal impact of different development patterns. So we'll hopefully be able to use that to make decisions that best support increased commercial development for our community.
And, with that increased commercial development actually comes the need for more infrastructure. So on the flip side, where you've got your sewer district and your fire district and your contracted police, you've got the city of Meridian, which is looking at rapid expansive growth and actually struggling to continue to provide one basic level of service, and that is a 5-minute 911 window. The mayor has said that he has a vision to push out and build 2 more fire stations, and within those fire stations would serve as substations for the police department. He's got some vision on transportation, but we all know that it's very hard to pass bonds, particularly in Western Ada County towns. So as you look at keeping your budgets flat, not raising your 3%, but also needing to put in massive amounts of infrastructure, how is the city of Meridian going to navigate that while still managing, the pocketbooks of your residents?
Well, Matt, if there was an easy answer to that, we would wrap up this conversation and be done today. The fact of the matter is these are hard challenges for growing municipalities. I recall a time in Meridian where if you live south of the railroad tracks, we didn't have fire service for you. And if a train came in, we weren't able to get a fire truck. And so now I'm proud we've got 6 stations with a plan for at least a 7th, potentially an 8th down the way. And I think for a city that's growing like Meridian, getting those buildings built, the infrastructure in place, that's achievable. But what a lot of folks don't know is that when a new fire station opens, that's a $1.5 million cost to the taxpayers every year moving forward. So when a city only has a limited option to increase property taxes by up to 3% without going to the voters, and Matt, to your point, we're a community that tries really hard to keep our property taxes low. It's a balancing act. It really comes down to what I think we're seeing jurisdictions, my good colleagues that are on this video with us today would probably attest, is it requires collaboration. And we're fortunate in Meridian that we've got a good working relationship with a rural fire district who's been a strong partner with us in getting stations built and getting stations staffed up sooner than maybe we'd be able to do if we were able to do it on our own. Replicating some of those same collaborative partnerships with the Ada County Highway District. The city of Meridian continues to talk about being willing to put forth some of our property tax reserves to get transportation projects accelerated. I'm sure, again, my good friends would probably attest, while we don't have the ability to have any oversight of our streets and roads and our schools, our citizens still expect us to solve the problems. And it requires collaborative solutions where we're really all working together, trying to row in the same direction to meet the needs of our global taxpayer.
I just want to kind of extend on that and talk a little bit about how do your cities interface with the ACHD, and what is the process there to make sure that you have the resources you need to continue to expand your infrastructure while working with an entirely different agency. And we can do this popcorn style where any of you can go if you have an answer for that.
Well, Matt, I'll chime in first. We've been working really hard to improve our relationship with our counterparts at ACHD for those reasons. One of the interesting things about Boise that I think isn't reflected in our neighboring cities is, by and large, our transportation needs are transportation improvements, not necessarily expansions in most cases. And so we're really working to improve pedestrian safety, bike safety, really make sure that our streets are engineered for their desired speeds, and make some of those improvements that have been long neglected.
And I'm happy to chime in, when we're kind of the exact opposite, where Meridian's geographic location, kind of being in the middle of all these jurisdictions, all the streets and roads to Boise, Eagle, Cuna, Nampa all flow through Meridian. And again, as we talk time and time again, we're continuing to grow. So we rely on expanded infrastructure, not just to meet the needs of Meridian citizens, but to all of our neighbors as well. Last year, for the first time ever, we had more people who live outside of Meridian travel into our community for their jobs, as we had Meridian residents traveling outside of Meridian for jobs. So it's a benefit when we expand our roadways in Meridian for all of our neighbors.
And I think for the city of Eagle, we've had a lot of time to work on grid connectivity and infrastructure improvements in our downtown. That's been on the radar for a long time, and it's finally coming to fruition. And so the city has been working really hard in partnership with ACHD to help fund those improvements to city standards. And over the next 3 years, I think our downtown is going to change drastically with intersection improvements and different mobility patterns. So,
you know, I want to go back to property tax for just a second and kind of discuss how cities increase their budget. So cities get this amalgamated pot of money that comes from the sales tax distribution. It comes from property taxes from both commercial and residential. There's an occupancy fee, and then there's new construction, which kind of helps for some of these development pieces. In all cases, all three of you have decided to hold your 3% at zero. So you're all going to forego your your up to 3% increase in property taxes, but you will still take new construction. Now, the new construction piece is critical because that's how you increase your services as your communities grow. But Holly, the city of Boise has not foregone that 3% increase since before you and I were elected to the legislature. So I believe the last time they foregone their balance was like 2008. This is the first year that the city of Boise is doing that. Can you talk a little bit about what you see in terms of how that's going to impact the city, if it's going to impact the services, and you know where we're at moving forward?
Yeah, well, that's a great point, Matt. So as we were going through our budget setting process, the original budget that was proposed by the mayor's office called for a 2% increase to property taxes. And as things were shifting with COVID, it quickly became clear to myself and other members of city council, and then the mayor, that was not smart. So we landed on taking a 0% increase. We're working really hard, and the mayor's office has been working really hard to make sure that that doesn't negatively impact the services that Boise city residents have come to expect. But the places it does impact is, salaries for staff, salaries for contract labor, and really the whole city has to look at their budget and come back to us and say, here's where we can give, here's where we can find efficiency, here's something that we can put off into a coming year. So I do believe that we'll be playing some catch up in coming years, but I think it was the smart and kind decision to make on behalf of all of our residents.
And so even though the city is holding they're foregoing their balance, do you anticipate our citizens, and you and I included in that, do you anticipate seeing property tax increases this year, even though the cities have held at revenue neutral and not increased their budgets?
Yeah, I fully expect that. Is if our residential property values go up as we see them doing, that's going to result in higher property taxes, even though we're not taking the 3% increase at the city level. So that's kind of, that's where we are between a rock and a hard place, because the legislature only allows homeowners to take a $100,000 homeowner exemption that's not indexed, that doesn't reflect the average home value in our area. We're still stuck with all of those increases, also increasing our property taxes.
This question's for all three of you, and I'll start with you, Luke. The governor's coronavirus, what were they called? Financial Advisory Committee has allocated millions of dollars for local municipalities to apply to public safety issues, with the idea that we can fund our public safety issues using some of the federal money from the CARES Act and hopefully lower our bottom line on the property tax front. How is this going to impact Meridian? How much have you all chosen to take, and how much will it actually impact the bottom line?
Yeah, so it's a really great question, and it's something that I really applaud the governor and his office and staff for bringing this forth. It's one of the reasons why Meridian didn't take a 3% increase, and I was really pleased with that. I think Meridian has a long history of trying to be resistant to any type of a property tax increase and being able to allocate some dollars that we were really able to provide some real tax relief for our citizens. The other piece, I want to touch on a couple of things that Councilmember Woodings talked about, it really putting municipal jurisdictions in a place of having to kind of level up our process in light of COVID. And it's not just about reducing services. I don't think any municipality wants to do that. It's about, she touched on this, finding efficiencies. I think all of us in our businesses are finding ways to work better and improve our process as a result of COVID. And local governments are no different. I mean, you look at all three of us that are on this panel today, we're taking testimony remotely, something I think that all of us have been wanting to really accomplish in our cities for a long time. Something I'm really proud of, as we continue to attract young families to the Treasure Valley, allowing them to participate in the public process by testifying remotely is a big deal. And I know I'm hopping on a quick soapbox here, but Councilmember Woodings is spot on with the issue of this $100,000 for property taxes on our assessments. We've got to have a better mousetrap when it comes to that. And that's something that I really hope that we as neighboring municipalities can work with our friends at the county and the state and come up with a better process to address that issue.
That was a huge issue when I was in the legislature. I mean, the battle over whether or not the homestead exemption should be indexed, we lost it, and they refixed the homeowners exemption. And they had a real reason for doing that. They believed that when housing market deflated, it caused too much of a transfer of the property tax onto commercial property. And so there were other solutions here, but one of the biggest things is our housing market at 20% increase year over year. You leave that $100,000 home exemption behind, and it really begins to hurt the residential folks. Miranda, how is Eagle taking the money from the CARES Act dollars, and how much is it going to impact your bottom line?
So through the governor's office, that offer was specifically related to public safety. And because the city of Eagle contracts with Ada County Sheriff's Office, the county applied for those dollars, and the city couldn't because of, that would be double dipping in the pot. And so that'll be a pass-through savings to taxpayers through the county and not the city for us.
Well, that's great, though. So your contract will essentially be underwritten by the CARES Act because the money from the governor's office will go to cover that pass-through, or are you still going to be paying the county for services?
So through our budget, we've already paid the county for those services, and it will pass through the county as a taxpayer savings.
Got it. Okay. Holly, Council Member Woodings, what's the plan for the city of Boise and the public safety money?
So we were one of the first cities who really showed that we were committed to taking the governor up on his offer and have been a huge part of the process. We're still kind of looking at what that means for us, but we wanted to take that 0% regardless of whether we were going to get that public safety money or not. And so our budget isn't contingent on that in any way. And that will be a savings to our taxpayers directly.
Wow, that's exciting. There's a question that's probably not as much for the city of Boise, but for the other two council members that came in through the comments about what are your cities doing to implement infrastructure for those experiencing homelessness outside of the city of Boise? So what is the city of Meridian doing, and what is the city of Eagle doing? Or is there active efforts to help with the larger homelessness challenges in the Treasure Valley?
I'm happy to jump in first. That's a very, very complicated issue. Again, we could devote, I think, a series about what the Valley can do to better address homelessness and home insecurity in the Valley. Where Meridian has allocated our efforts is in a number of different places. So I'm a longtime volunteer and supporter of the Meridian Food Bank, and we work to try and provide food security for folks, not just in Meridian, but across the Valley. It's a really remarkable organization because it's all volunteer led, so no staff draws a salary. In addition, from the city government side, we have focused a lot of our community development block grant funding to address home insecurity. So that is providing rental assistance, down payment assistance, and identifying housing opportunities for folks within the region. We haven't had the conversation at the council level in the past 6 years about building a facility. I think it's something that the council is always open to having that conversation. But it's one of those issues too. The city doesn't have a lot of experience in dealing with those types of services and would really need to rely on some of our subject matter experts from neighboring jurisdictions who are doing it really well.
And for the city, we have not, since we've had this new council come on, and we've been really busy with a lot of other issues that have come up. We haven't really had that council level discussion either. We have a lot of really great folks in our community who help support different organizations and resources, and the city is membership in some of those, and we also support organizations who like Allenbaugh House, and who help to provide services to people who need them. But collectively, we haven't had that conversation about what we can do at the city level to help support. To Councilmember Cavner's comment about the block grant, that's not something that the city of Eagle has access to with our population at this point.
And I think that again goes to this kind of, as we are an emerging, I guess, metro area, the disparate cities are going to have to start really having these larger conversations about how to share this responsibility, because when you put it on one city, it tends to be problematic, and that's evidenced by a lot of the things that we're experiencing in the Valley. Miranda, I've got a question for you, Councilmember Gold. I got a question for you, and that is, this year, the Idaho House of Representatives took up a bill that was a budget freeze for cities and local municipalities. It was billed as a property tax decrease for citizens. Luckily, from the chamber's view, it did not pass, but talk a little bit about how this would have impacted the city of Eagle and other municipalities, and what was your city's take on it?
That bill would have frozen city budgets and the ability to accrue and collect foregone taxes. It also did not incorporate new growth into the base of the budget, so that would have forced existing taxpayers to pay for the cost of new infrastructure. And it didn't consider the rise of residential values in relation to commercial values. So it didn't incorporate that tax burden and how it's been pushed to residential property owners. As Councilmember Woodings commented, property taxes would continue to increase due to increased property value assessments, and cities and other impacted taxing districts would still need to provide critical services and infrastructure to meet the demands of this increased growth. So in communities like ours in Eagle and all through the Treasure Valley that are experiencing rapid growth, and we support implementing ways for growth to pay for itself, this bill would have negatively impacted our ability to provide those resources and infrastructure to serve the growth, and would have placed the additional burden on the existing taxpayers.
In Councilman Cavner, you've been around a long time, starting with your internship with Senator Ensign. You understand the global policy piece as well as anybody. And so my question for you is, what else could the legislature do to help cities and help our citizens who are experiencing these crazy increases in their property tax bills? What could the legislature do to kind of help offset that?
It's a great question. And I think there's two things that I really am always suggesting. One, I think a lot of people make sense on the surface. One's a little bit more of an out of the box type of thought. The first thing I think the legislature could do is allow either school districts or cities to collect impact fees on school districts' behalf. We started this conversation talking about how a growing community like Meridian has been able to be successful by having growth pay for itself. Allowing school districts to impose impact fees in areas that are growing would alleviate a huge property tax burden on our taxpayers. Again, Councilmember Gold talked about that. The biggest contributor to a property tax bill for most folks in Idaho is not the local jurisdiction. It's more often than not the school district. So let's allow impact fees to provide for capital infrastructure, new schools, and alleviate that bond cost that gets passed on to the taxpayers. I think that's the easiest. The other one's a little more out of the box. And I've got an 8th grader, and so we're starting to have these conversations about college and where he wants to go. And what we see is that if he wants to leave out of state, we have to be prepared that he's going to pay more in tuition than some of the students who live in state. And I think that we could actually apply the same approach to the homeowners exemption. And what if, for instance, for maybe a period of 3 years, if you move outside of a county into a new county, you don't get that homeowners exemption for your first 3 years. That's a different approach that would provide property tax relief to all Idahoans and would ensure additional revenue to a lot of those taxing districts that need it. Everything from the mosquito abatement district to the cemetery district to local jurisdictions. It's a way I think that we can provide property tax relief and really have growth pay for itself. So those are the two. If I could wave a magic wand and they could implement both of those, I think we'd be in a much better direction.
Well, there's an interesting segue here. There's a question in the comment feed about, and anyone can answer this, whoever feels like they've got it down. But the question is, how have any of the cities talked about charging an extra tax for property owners of investment properties? And I know that there's some constitutional issues with that, but I thought I'd put it out to you all to maybe answer it.
Matt, I'll go ahead and take that up. The one thing I would have added to Councilmember Cavner's list is that index of the property of the homeowners exemption. And that's how owners of of investment properties pay additional tax, is they don't receive that that amount. And so, like for me, we own the house that we live in, and then we own another home that we rent out. And so on the home that we rent out, we pay about an extra $1,000 a year. And so that's how that's captured currently. And I feel like that's fair. It would be even more fair if we had an indexed homeowners exemption.
And to your point, when I was in the legislature, one of the things that and I'm pretty sure this is accurate, is it isn't probably constitutional to charge different levy rates to different types of property. So you need a uniform levy rate, which would make the idea of applying additional fees to investment properties probably unviable for that reason. So that then comes in the point of, our investment properties continuing to drive the cost of prices and real estate. And that's why we come back to the homeowners exemption. Yep. People who are living in their home and plan to be in their home over the long term need to be able to adapt to the inflationary causes of the real estate market by seeing an increase in their homestead exemption. And that's really important. I appreciate that. I got one more question or two more questions, Luke, and then we'll take a couple more from the audience. But we're talking about the homestead exemption. Sorry, Holly, I've already asked you, Luke.
That's okay.
Boise decided not to take its 3% increase for the first time in about a decade, as I asked earlier. But this sudden changing of course is likely to kind of not change property tax bills anywhere because of the inflationary piece. So why did you do it? And quite frankly, do you see any possibility that the money coming from the CARES Act would actually lead to a property tax cut for us at our homestead level?
That's a lot of the reason that we decided to pursue the governor's safety reimbursement plan, was because we really think that could actually put some more money into the pocketbooks of our residents, even if it doesn't turn out that reduces their property tax levy, which is kind of still to be seen. And I would say that overall, for people who are living in neighborhoods that aren't increasing as quickly in property value, they will see some relief. under the 0% increase. So it really, in Boise, it's very dependent on where you live and what the property values have been doing in your specific area.
This question is for all three of you, and it comes from a comment, but we've been partnering with the Boise Young Professionals on a host of events. And quite frankly, the three of you are some of the youngest council members in the entire Ada County area. And what advice would you have for young people who are trying to learn about issues like property taxes, and how would you encourage them to get involved in a meaningful way in their community? Councilwoman Gold.
Well, it's not, it doesn't tend to be framed as the most interesting or exciting subject for young people, but it definitely impacts all of us. So I think the budgeting process is a great place to jump in and learn about those things, not only with the cities, but the counties and other taxing districts. And there are like this event, and there are several different organizations that help provide resources for people to get educated on how we collect and apply property taxes.
I'm happy to jump in because, I love local government, in part because I think it's the closest to the people. And so if there are folks from any age that want to get involved, step one is show up. I think all three of our jurisdictions have programs that are designed to educate high school students and younger people about government, but we don't always do a great job of grabbing those young professionals. And so we have to encourage them to show up. Councilmember Gold's correct. I showed up to testify on a city budget in 2013, and I was the first person to testify on a budget in like 5 or 6 years. We don't get a lot of people who show up. So if somebody does, I think we all take notice. It's finding the issues that you care about, whether it's arts in your community, public places, transportation, solid waste. Find the thing that's important to you and start getting involved. I think what's also great, again, about local government is that your local officials are so accessible, either via email or phone calls or just showing up at City Hall. I know that I get really excited when people at all age take an interest in our community, and I want to work alongside them to help make them successful.
And Matt, I'm just going to add, you mentioned BYP, which I think is a great organization and does so much to educate young professionals about the issues in the community. Boise has additional resources like our Livability Ambassadors program. We have neighborhood associations. We have so many ways for young people to get involved, and we encourage that at every level. And I wanted to put a plug in, Matt, and you'll appreciate this. Leadership Boise is also a really great program. I've seen so many amazing young leaders come out of that with a better understanding of how our city works. So highly encourage that as well.
Well, and I think there's Leadership Meridian as well through the Meridian Chamber of Commerce. And to your point, those are the types of things that people can get involved in. I want to touch on one last question, and that is, when I was in the legislature in the 8 years that I was down there, I saw at least 4 or 5 bills that would have made city elections partisan. And cities have an incredible role in ensuring that our services are delivered. And I'd just like to hear your perspective on whether or not, and what would that do to your form of government if suddenly it was hyper-partisanized or partisanized at all, for that matter? Who'd like to start?
I'll go ahead and start. I think I'm the one here who served in both partisan and nonpartisan office. And I will say that if it were up to me, I would make all elections nonpartisan, because then you really have to know what a candidate stands for and what their values are and how their values match up with yours. I really think it makes a more functional government that works on behalf of everyone. And I know that Councilmember Cavner has said this before, and I can't remember who it's attributed to originally, but there's no Republican and no Democrat way to pick up the garbage. And I think you see that at cities every day. So we're working right now through the process of coming up with a way to district our cities and working with the legislature to make sure that that bill is implemented in a way that we can comply with. But I think that going to partisan would really ultimately negatively impact the way that cities work.
Miranda.
Well, I agree with Councilmember Woodings' comments, and something that Councilmember Cavner said a minute ago about how local elected officials are really accessible to the public, and our issues are, the things that we deal with, like garbage pickup and park development and things like that, are something that all residents value. And I think that it's really important for us to be able to earnestly communicate with each other on issues that we care about in our community. And I see partisanship in local elections as a barrier to that conversation.
For me, it really boils down to, how does it benefit the voter? I think sometimes, again, I'm a proud Republican, a proud conservative, but I want people to elect me because of my views on the issues and the way that I'm going to work for our community. I think that really, we, as voters, we should want that of all of our elected officials. And I think sometimes taking a partisan tag on your name can be a cop-out. It can allow you to not maybe address the issues head on. I'm sure, like all three of my colleagues, when you're out campaigning and you're knocking doors, people want to talk to you about the issues. I do get asked my political party from time to time, and I'm happy to provide that. But more often than not, when it's about local government, people are caring about those local issues. So until you can really show me how moving to partisanship would benefit the voter, it's not something I'm really warm to. And thanks, Councilmember Woodings, for stealing my talking point.
One last question for you, Councilmember Woodings. The city of Boise just came out with these small business grants that have been provided by the Coronavirus Advisory Committee. I can't remember exactly how many millions of dollars you have for small businesses in the city of Boise, but would you take a second to talk about that? And on the backside, to the other council members, if you all are looking at the same thing, we'll pick it up there.
Yeah, so Boise recently allocated $1.5 million of coronavirus funds for small business loans. And this has been something that I think Matt and I originally talked about the potential of doing this months ago, when coronavirus was pretty new to us and businesses were having to shut down quickly. And so I'm very thankful that we were able to work through that process, come up with something that works. And that will allow businesses under 100 employees within the city of Boise to apply for a $15,000 grant. Those applications are live on the city of Boise website right now. So hopefully that'll provide some relief to our smaller businesses. Oh, I see you have a little ticker across the bottom with a link.
I do. I've got that for you, so you can. To my colleagues from the other cities, have your city started to have this conversation about how to do this?
Yeah. In Meridian, we're doing something somewhat similar, but a little bit different. So ours it's a reimbursement, and the ceiling right now is $10,000, and so we are looking to basically do, I think, a very, very similar program. I know that the city of Meridian has been working kind of hand in glove with the city of Boise, trying to kind of match your earlier point. A lot of times folks don't recognize the difference between Boise and Meridian. And so trying to work as cohesively together on these types of programs so that they're similar regardless of where that business is located.
And Miranda.
Yeah. So in Eagle, we're in the process of working to provide grants to small businesses. We're just in process right now, so it's not something that is available quite yet, but it's definitely something that we've been considerate of. Right when coronavirus hit, we created a small business recovery task force that meets regularly and helps to provide input on how the city can support small businesses. And so we're definitely working towards that for grant support, and hope to see that roll out pretty quick.
I want to thank you all for being here today and for having this discussion. I know that property tax is like an enigma to many of the people in our community, and it isn't easy to explain, but I think the gist of today is that no matter what we do at the city level, whether we're freezing our budgets, taking money from the CARES Act to try to lower, if we continue to see residential property valuations rapidly increase, citizens are likely to feel the effects of that as the budget transfers more to residential property. And that's a huge issue. I appreciate you all taking the time to talk a little bit about your cities and explain to us the differences between them. The Boise Metro Chamber of Commerce thanks our sponsors always, Hayden Homes and the Idaho Housing and Finance Association. They've been great to us. They've helped us keep our employees doing great things. We'll be back next Tuesday with a BYP Idaho Statesman partnership called our Be Voting series with Senator Cherie Buckner-Webb and Representative Robert Anders, both outgoing legislators who are retiring. And they're going to be talking a little bit about the position from a nonpartisan perspective and its role within our overall government community. Holly, Luke, Miranda, thank you so much. Thanks to everybody who watched and joined us today, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Matt.